You opened this video thinking it was by accident, that the algorithm got lucky, that the title was good. You want to believe it was a well-timed coincidence on an ordinary day. But Carl Jung spent decades watching ordinary people say exactly the same phrase right before they fell apart. And he understood something most of humanity will never admit. Nothing finds you before its time, and nothing stays invisible once your consciousness has matured enough to see it. What looks like chance is almost always a delayed mirror. You didn't find this video. It appeared when your mind could no longer sustain the version of yourself you had been performing. There is a silent illusion almost everyone carries, and it is the illusion that reality is fixed. People believe the world is an objective place, existing out there, waiting to be observed by any open eye. Jung understood something colder. The world does not give itself equally to everyone. It reveals itself in layers, and each layer demands a specific internal state from the one who observes. What you call chance is, in truth, a coincidence between your level of consciousness and an external event that was always there, waiting for a receiver tuned to the right frequency. Synchronicity is not magic. It is the cold geometry of perception when it finally matures. You have probably lived this without noticing. You spent months hearing the same sentence from different people, and it never touched you. One day, one of those sentences appeared in a banal context, and you felt as if you had been punched in the chest. Nothing changed in the world. What changed was you. Your psyche reached the point where that information, previously discarded as noise, became legible. Jung would call that a synchronistic encounter between matter and meaning. And the cruelest part is that if you had not been ready, that same sentence would have passed by your side, like warm wind passes. The truth does not seek you out. It waits. And it is here that most people miscalculate their own lives. They think they need to chase more information, more books, more gurus, more courses, more podcasts. They accumulate content like someone accumulating furniture in a room with no floor. But Jung saw that the problem was never the absence of an answer. The problem is the inner state a person inhabits when the answer arrives. The truth was always available. You are the one who was not. And that is why this video may seem, to some, just another video, and to you a fold in time. It is not the video. It is the moment in which it found you. There is a principle Jung repeated almost relentlessly. Perception is not a passive act. It is a consequence of the inner state. Two people can enter the same room and leave with completely different accounts, not because one mind was attentive and the other distracted, but because each consciousness filtered reality through invisible structures shaped by fear, expectation, wound, and desire. You do not see the world. You see what your psyche allows to exist for you. And what it has not yet integrated, it erases. Reality remains there, whole indifferent, waiting to be recognized by someone whole enough to bear it. That is why certain people seem to see patterns where others only see chaos. They perceive when someone is lying before the sentence is finished. They feel when a decision is wrong before the mistake manifests. They recognize signs in trivial conversations that would go unnoticed by any ordinary listener. This is not a gift, nor mystical intuition, nor psychic luck. It is mental coherence. It is the reduction of internal noise until the world's signal can reach the depths of consciousness without being distorted along the way. As long as your mind is busy trying to appear healthy to others, it will never have enough silence to hear itself. And here is the part almost no one wants to accept. Your inability to perceive certain things is not a problem of intelligence. It is a problem of courage. The human mind automatically filters out whatever threatens the identity it built to survive. If you recognize today what you already know, you would have to change. You would have to leave a relationship. You would have to abandon a job. You would have to disappoint someone who trusts your obedience. So your psyche protects the structure, erasing the signal before it reaches the surface. You are not distracted. You are too faithful to the character you built, and the price of that fidelity is blindness. That is why I prepared the Código do Despertar for you. This is the turning point. This is the moment when you stop accumulating information and begin integrating consciousness. Over 60 days, you receive one lesson per day based on Jung's deep psychology, with keys, questions, and statements designed to dissolve the invisible filters that are preventing you from perceiving what is already before you. It is not a course. It is an inner map to escape paralysis and find direction. The link is in the first pinned comment. If you feel the hour has come, write the word presencer in the comments. That is your symbolic commitment to the next version of yourself. Now understand what Jung saw behind all of this. He realized that the human mind does not function as an isolated island, like a small generator of individual thoughts that resolve within themselves. The mind is a receiver. It is constantly picking up signals from a larger field that he called the collective unconscious, a psychic layer shared by all humanity, made of archetypes, primordial images, and patterns that cross eras, cultures, and languages. When you have a strange dream that seems ancient, you did not invent that dream, you picked it up. When you feel tension with no apparent reason before a personal catastrophe, you are not being paranoid. You are reading a deeper layer of reality that your daytime mind refuses to admit. The problem is that this receiver is clogged. Most people live in uninterrupted psychic noise. Other people's opinions, notifications, family expectations, digital comparisons, inner voices inherited from figures who have already died. At that volume, no deep signal can get through. Intuition becomes just another voice in a crowded room, and then the person concludes they have no intuition, when what they lack is silence. Jung said that what emerges from the unconscious rises slowly, like an image forming on a photographic plate inside a dark liquid. If you shake the liquid all the time, the image never takes shape. You look and see only blotches, and you call that life. Presence, deep attention, and observation without judgment are the three operations that reduce that noise. It is not meditation as aesthetics. It is not breathing as fashion. It is a cold discipline of being whole in a single moment without trying to turn it into content, into an excuse, into proof. It is observing your own thought the way one observes a passing cloud, without rushing to hold on to what dissolves. When you do this with consistency, the unconscious understands that there is a safe space to emerge, and it begins to send messages that were once swallowed by urgency. Dreams become clearer. Synchronicities multiply, the right people appear, the right books fall into your hand. None of that is magic. You simply stopped blocking the channel. And that's precisely why the most important messages of your life almost always arrive late. Not because the universe is cruel, but because your consciousness was on another frequency when the warning first passed by. Jung observed that the psyche works through windows. There are moments, short and specific, in which a person is able to comprehend a certain truth. Outside that window, the same truth slips away, is reinterpreted, is reduced to cliché. You've read sentences today that would have changed your life 10 years ago, and you read them without feeling a thing. It's not that the sentence aged, it's that you are no longer the one who needed it. The opposite happens too. There are sentences you read years ago that only now, when you hear them again, burst something open inside you, and you ask yourself how you didn't see it before. The answer is hard. You did see it. You always saw it. You just chose not to let it translate into consciousness because, at that moment, integrating that truth would have cost something you weren't willing to lose. Beliefs cost less than changes. So the psyche prefers to recycle the belief, even if it's slowly killing you, rather than accept the new information that would demand a complete overhaul of your identity. Filters are cruel because they are invisible. You don't perceive what you don't perceive, and that's where the most elegant self-deception of the human species lives. People think they're seeing reality when they're only seeing their own mental map projected onto it. Fear filters, resentment filters, expectation filters, need for approval filters. Each of these layers erases certain frequencies from the world, and what's left is a poor, predictable version that only confirms what you already thought. That's why stuck people think everything is the same. It's not the world that's the same. It's the filter that doesn't change. And then comes the part no one wants to hear. When you repeatedly ignore a signal, it doesn't disappear. It accumulates. Jung was relentless on this point. The psyche has a tendency toward totality, and what is denied at first whispers, then it murmurs, then it speaks, then it screams. And when the scream is also ignored, The psyche builds an external event to force what wasn't heard internally. A crisis, a loss, an illness, a rupture, a collapse. People call that bad luck. Jung would call it a final warning. The unconscious always collects, and it collects in expensive currency. You've already lived this pattern without naming it. There was an inner voice telling you that relationship was dead, and you pretended it was anxiety. There was a feeling that that job was erasing you, and you called it gratitude. There was a discomfort that repeated itself in different contexts, and you silenced it with productivity, with cheap pleasure, with rationalization. And when you were finally forced to look, the world had already crumbled around you. It wasn't unfair, it was consequential. It was the price of years of ignoring the signs your psyche tried to deliver gently. What Jung called individuation begins when a person accepts that the conflict was never external. It is merely the drawing in the world of what hasn't yet been resolved inside. As long as you look for someone to blame, the pattern repeats. As long as you recycle the same relationships with different names, the pattern repeats. As long as you change cities, jobs, speeches without changing consciousness, the pattern repeats. And each return is more violent than the last, because the psyche turns up the volume until you finally stop running. That's why I prepared the Código du Despertar for you. 60 days, one lesson a day, so you can stop reacting to the signs and start deciphering them before they become crises. The link is in the first pinned comment. If this video found you today, it's because the window is open. It doesn't stay open forever. And there is a silent practice that Jung recommended, without fanfare, without mystical promise, without promise of miracle, a cold practice, almost clinical, that changes the life of whoever has the courage to sustain it. Before sleeping, review the day. Not in search of productivity, in search of strangeness. Return mentally to the scenes of the day and look for 3 things: moments of discomfort you couldn't explain, coincidences that made you think twice, and sudden clarities that appeared without apparent reason. These are the 3 signatures of the unconscious asking to be heard. Note it, write it, record it, even if it seems banal, especially when it seems banal. Then reread these notes once a week, not to interpret quickly, but to look for patterns among events that seemed disconnected. You will begin to notice that the same sign appears in different contexts, that the same word reappears in different people, that the same feeling returns before decisions you postpone. That is how synchronicity becomes visible. It was always there. You just never stopped long enough to catalogue. Without this record, the psyche speaks to you in code, and you remain illiterate. With this record, you learn the language of your own soul. What changes in this practice is not the world, it is the observer, and it is the only change that matters, because when the observer changes, what they observe also changes, not because reality reorganized itself, but because layers that were previously invisible come to be perceived. You begin to notice details in people who once seemed flat. You begin to anticipate movements in situations that once caught you by surprise. You begin to recognize your own projections before they lead you to idiotic decisions. It is a transformation without drama, except that it reorganizes your entire life in silence. But here comes a trap. Not everything that seems like a sign is a sign. The mind also produces noise that disguises itself as intuition. Anxiety dresses up as premonition. Desire dresses up as vocation. Fear dresses up as wisdom. If you don't know how to distinguish, you will chase every impulse as if it were revelation, and your life will turn into a sequence of impulsive decisions justified with spiritual language. Jung was brutal on this point. Without discernment, the unconscious does not free you, it enslaves you. And that is why he left concrete clues to recognize when a message is profound, and when it is merely well-packaged psychic noise. There are 4 clear signs. The first is a striking physical sensation. The profound message does not stay only in the head. It descends. It tightens the chest, prickles the nape of the neck, leaves a weight in the stomach, provokes a strange warmth, an inexplicable lightness. The body is the first territory where the unconscious writes. If your body did not react, it was probably just thought. The second sign is sudden clarity. You were confused, and suddenly you understood everything. Without reasoning, without arguing, without constructing the logic step by step, It was as if the answer were already there, waiting for you to divert your attention just enough to see it. The third sign is a strong emotional response, and often disproportionate to the event. You cry without apparent reason, feel anger at a harmless phrase, are overtaken by a dense sadness at a banal detail. This indicates that the external scene triggered an internal layer that was awaiting recognition. The fourth sign is persistence. The impression does not pass. It returns in the early hours, appears in the middle of another activity, resonates in another conversation. What is noise passes, what is a message insists. If after days that sensation keeps knocking from within, it is because it came from a layer deeper than your routine. And here is the cruel refinement. Recognizing a profound message is not receiving a command. Jung never told you to act immediately on every intuition. The message is information, not instruction. It reveals a previously invisible angle of a decision, a relationship, a path. It is up to you, with expanded awareness, to choose. The primary impulse is to react. Psychic maturity is to integrate. Many people confuse the two, act impulsively in the name of intuition, destroy what could still have been repaired, and then blame the unconscious for the wreckage. The unconscious delivers the map. You are the one driving the car. That is why I prepared the awakening code for you. If this video has reached this point and you are still here, the signal has already struck. To ignore it now is to consciously choose to remain deaf. The link is in the first pinned comment. 60 days for you to learn to read the signs your life has been delivering for years. The window will not stay open indefinitely. And it is at this point that Jung's thesis ceases to be individual psychology and becomes something greater, more uncomfortable, almost philosophical. He spent the last years of his life sustaining the idea that there is a layer of reality where matter and psyche are no longer separate. He called it the unus mundus, the unified world. It is the silent hypothesis that what we call external and what we call internal are, at bottom, two expressions of the same substance. If this is true, and Jung believed it was, then every dream is not merely a private theatre. It is a window into that common layer. Every synchronicity is a visible fold of that unity. Every symbol that repeats in your life is a finger pointing at something language does not yet know how to name. He himself paid the price of that discovery. For years he plunged into his own unconscious, in an inner crisis known as the confrontation with the unconscious, and recorded everything in images, writings, and visions that would later become the Red Book. It was not an academic exercise, it was a descent. He saw figures, heard voices, crossed inner landscapes that any mediocre psychiatrist would have diagnosed as madness. But Jung understood something essential. That was not disorder. It was structure. It was the psyche reorganizing itself at a deeper level, revealing the archetypes that sustain all of humanity. He came out of it with a cold certainty. Most people live on the surface of themselves because they are afraid of what lies beneath. Awakening in the Jungian sense is not euphoria. It has no soundtrack. It has no Instagram post. It is an irreversible shift in perception. You begin to see the same scenes, the same people, the same habits, and recognize layers that were once invisible. You notice the masks others wear without judgment, because you recognize the one you yourself carried for decades. You notice emotional manipulations as predictable choreography. You notice the repetitive patterns of your own history as spirals your psyche drew while trying to warn you. None of this makes you happier right away. It makes you more lucid. And lucidity at first hurts because it destroys the illusions you used as a cushion. The point of no return is this. Once you have seen, you cannot unsee. You can pretend. You can go back to distracting yourself. You can turn up the volume of your screens to drown out the silence. But deep down, you know. And that knowing will weigh on every decision. It will make you feel like a stranger in environments where you once fit in. It will pull you away from people whose company depended on your unconsciousness. It will bring you back to parts of yourself you had buried in order to be accepted. It is not a pretty promise. It is a brutal reorganization. But it is the only one that produces meaning. Everything else is postponement. And here is the final line, the cold line, the line Jung never disguised with poetry. You can close this video now, go back to the noise, go back to the script you were following before you clicked here, go back to the relationships that have already died inside. to the work that has already erased your axis, to the version of yourself that others learn to tolerate. You can pretend this video was just a video, that the repetition of these signs is random, that the discomfort will pass. And it will pass, until it returns stronger, through a loss you didn't choose, a rupture you didn't foresee, a crisis that only exists because you refuse the gentle warnings. Or you can accept that nothing finds you by chance, and that what sought you out today asked in return only one thing: courage to stop pretending. The link is in the first pinned comment. The choice is yours. Just don't say later that no one warned you.